Thanks for coming. It's nice to see a good turnout. I appreciate it. I'm going to crank this down just a little bit. Cup holders in the lecture hall? Seriously? Man, school was never like that, believe me. Okay, so why is this a big deal? It's a really big deal now with this whole Supreme Court nomination and all the stuff that's going on. And if anybody in this room, I hope no one in here is so naive to think that absolutely everything you have seen and heard in the press over the last 2 months about the Supreme Court nomination isn't totally and utterly about Roe versus Wade. That's what the whole thing is about. So why is this important? Why am I here? Why are you here? If you're pro-life, I understand how you feel. If you are pro-choice, I understand how you feel, because I was exactly the same for a very long time. But I want you to understand a little bit about me, perhaps, and how I got from one to the other. And then we're going to talk about this in general, but I really do welcome your questions and hope we can get a good discussion going. Okay, so what are we talking about at the basic root? I want you to imagine that you're an obstetrician gynecologist like me. And I want you to imagine that you are a pro-choice obstetrician gynecologist like I used to be. Your patient today is 17 years old. She's 20 weeks pregnant. Now, if you could see her baby, which is very easy to do on an ultrasound, her baby would be as big as the length of your hand, from head to rump, from your middle finger to your wrist. That big. She's been feeling her baby kick for the last 2 weeks, but now she's asleep on an operating room table, and you're there to help her with her problem. You walk into an operating room scrubbed and gowned, and to the right of the table, of the operating table, there's a smaller table where your instruments are located. And the first thing you're going to reach for is a suction catheter. This is a 12 French suction catheter. I used to have a 14, but it disappeared. It's about 9 inches long. It's clear plastic. And I want you to picture yourself putting this up through the cervix, into the, through the vagina, through the cervix, and into the uterus, and then instruct your circulating nurse to turn on the suction machine. Now, what you'll see is pale yellow fluid running through the tubing into the machine. That was the amniotic fluid that was there to protect the baby. Now, if she were only, and I told you, a 20-week baby, head to rump, not counting the legs, is the middle of your finger to your wrist. If she were 12 weeks pregnant or less, measured from her last period, her baby would be, a 12-week baby is the width of your hand, head to rump, not counting the legs. And if she were 12 weeks pregnant or less, you pretty much could do the entire abortion with this one instrument. But babies this big don't fit through catheters this size. When you're done with that, you reach for your SOFR clamp, so you don't have to imagine when I brought one along. Now, I will pass this around. I will pass around both these instruments. Everybody put up your right hand. I promise to give Dr. Levatino back his instruments at the end of the evening, all right? I want these to disappear. You can't get them. They're hard to get. It's really interesting. I went through airline security this morning. It gets them every time. Pulled my bag over. He went right for it, and he pulls it out, and he's looking at it, and he's going, "What is it?" So I said, "You really want to know?" And he said, "Yeah." And I told him what it is. I'm going to tell you what it is. You get your SOFR clamp. It's about 13 inches long. It's stainless steel. And the business end, when you get a hold of this, look at it. It's about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. And when you get this in your hands and look at it, you're going to feel it's a heavy clamp. And there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A D&E abortion, a second trimester D&E abortion, is a blind procedure. You can't see anything. It's all done by feel. So picture yourself, and I'm serious, picture yourself putting this up through the uterus. Be really careful, because the walls are thin and soft, and it is easy as pie to go right through them. Then grasp with the instrument. Grab hold of anything you can. You can't see what you're doing, just grab something. And feel yourself pulling, and I mean hard. And out pops a leg that big, which you put down on the table. Reach in again. Grab blindly. Pull hard. Out comes an arm the same length, which you put down on the table. And reach in with this instrument again and again and tear out the spine, the intestines, and the heart and lungs. Now, the head on a baby that size is about the size of a plum. And again, you can't see it. You have a pretty good idea you're there if you've got a hold of something and your fingers are spread as far as they'll go. You know you did it right if you crush down on the clamp and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Now you can pull out skull pieces. You have a bad day like I had a lot of times, sometimes a little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations. You just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose. You just made $800 cash in 15 minutes. Here you go. I graduated from medical school in 1976, and I say that and it's scary. It's so long ago, okay? But I wasn't that long ago. I was sitting in the chairs just like you are. And if you asked me when I got out of medical school how I felt about the abortion issue, I would not have hesitated for a second to tell you that I was pro-choice. This is a decision between a woman, her doctor, and nobody, including the baby's father, has anything to say about it. A lot of people identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. But for a lot of people, it doesn't really affect their lives. But when you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say, I'm pro-life or pro-choice, now this isn't just some vague political position or maybe decides who you vote for. You have to decide whether you're going to actually do those procedures. But I was pro-choice. So right along with, in my residency, learning how to do deliveries and hysterectomies and all the stuff that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do abortions. We had a clinic in our hospital at the time. It was the late 70s. Technology was a little different then. And if patients were 12 to 13 weeks from their last period pregnant or less, we'd bring them in for suction D&C abortions. Now, a lot of first trimester abortions now are done with medications, but back then, suction D&C was the only method we have, and suction D&C is still the majority of first trimester abortions. And we would bring them into the hospital for their abortions. Believe it or not, we used to do the abortions in the delivery room. And when it was my turn to do them, I'd do 2, 3, 4 in the morning, never thought anything of it. If they were more than 13 weeks pregnant at the time, we would bring them back a few weeks later for what's called a saline abortion. These are not done anymore. They are technically dangerous. But just suffice it to say that these women have to go through labor, and it would take anywhere from 8 to 36 hours after the saline injections for them to abort their usually dead children. But hey, I was pro-choice. I was there to learn my trade. And it doesn't matter whether a doctor is pro-abortion or pro-choice or pro-life. Every doctor wants the same thing: happy, healthy patients. Now, it was during my training that I was working one night, went down to the cafeteria for a break, and in my first year of training, and an attractive nurse came and sat next to me that I'd never met before, and she's the lady that I eventually married. Now, when we were dating, we made the first and biggest mistake we've ever made in our relationship. See, because I'm doing abortions, I'm pro-choice. She's pro-life. She doesn't think this is such a great idea. When she was in her nurse's training, now we were in New York State. New York State legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade. That was old news in New York by the time Roe versus Wade came along. And she was given an opportunity to learn to do abortion procedures, and she flat out said, no, I don't want to do that. And that was the end of it, she figured. But until we met, and we started dating, and pretty soon found out we were on opposite ends of the issue. And this is when I said we make the biggest, dumbest thing you can ever do in a relationship. Instead of talking about it, instead of hashing it out, we just ignored it because it was easier. And that's a dumb, stupid thing to do in a relationship. We got married, And by that point, we were, in our late 20s. We thought we were really old. And we wanted to have kids. So we decided to have a family of our own and found out pretty quickly my wife had an infertility problem. We had an infertility problem, really. No kids. I sent her to the best infertility specialist in town. Now, you guys are pretty young, but any woman who's been through an infertility workup knows that it is difficult, painful, embarrassing. It's horrible. And it came down to, she'd already had one surgical procedure, and the physician who was taking care of her said, well, I'm going to do one last procedure. It should take about an hour and a half. And I can see the room, I can see the paint and the wallpaper, I can see him. And he walked out and he said, when he walked out of the operating room 4.5 hours later, he came up to me and he said, look, I never tell anyone they're not going to be able to have a child, but don't count on it. We were devastated. I mean, I'm from a big Italian family. She's from a big Irish family. Having kids was something we wanted to do. It's something we talked about before we got married. Suddenly we realized we may not be able to have children. And after we got over that shock, we decided, well, we'll adopt a child. We love a child that, that doesn't necessarily somebody we birthed. So we went out and tried to find a child to adopt. And anyone who's tried to adopt a child finds out how difficult that is. We went to state agencies, we went to county agencies, we went to religious agencies. Every night I came home, we were trying to find one more phone number that we could call to try to find a child of our own, but no dice. The best we could do after over a year of effort was to get on a 5-year waiting list to get on the real waiting list. That was the best we could do. And it was during this time that I had my first doubts about doing abortions. I'm not an idiot. I know one reason there's not many kids to adopt is guys like me who's doing abortions. And my reasoning was totally selfish. I remember literally, and again, I can remember the room as clear as we're sitting now here. And I'm in the middle of doing a suction D&C abortion in the delivery room, and I look down at these pile of body parts, and I was saying, gosh, wouldn't even one of these ladies allow us to take her baby home to care for our own? But it doesn't usually work that way. And the way things worked out was I had what my wife credits as probably the best idea I've had in our entire 41-year marriage. And that was, I thought, this is stupid. We're beating our heads against the wall trying to deal with adoption agencies and the rest of these things. This is dumb. I know 50 obstetricians on a first-name basis. Let's advertise. Let's let them all know we're looking for a baby. And that maybe we'd get lucky and somebody would slip through the cracks and we'd be able to adopt a baby. And that's exactly what we did. We advertised. In August of 1978, I was working in the operating room with one of the attending physicians, and that stuff you see on TV is true. When you're sitting in one of those surgical get-ups, you can't touch anything but the instruments and the patient. You know what happened? Anybody here trying to get into medical school? I know this is an engineering college. A couple of people. Let me tell you what happened. Yeah. Let me tell you, the first time they put you in that get-up and you can't touch yourself, everything starts to itch the minute they put it on. You learn how to ignore it. It's exactly how you deal with it. Anyway, I was scrubbed and gowned in that operating room doing a procedure with an attending physician, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and the circulating nurse was holding up a piece of paper, and it said, call Marcia as soon as you're done. Now, Marcia was the head of social services at Albany Medical Center where I was working, and she's one of the people we had talked to. That's all the note said, but I knew what it was. And sure enough, when I called her, she informed me that there was a 15-year-old girl in labor in the delivery room. She had had no prenatal care of any kind. The first time she'd ever seen a doctor during her entire pregnancy was the day before. But now she's in labor. Everything seems to be going along well. The baby looks healthy. She's willing to give her baby up for adoption. Are you interested? Well, hell yeah, I'm interested. I remember, again, literally staring at the face of the telephone to call my wife with this news and know that I was just 7 digits away from becoming a father. And literally, by the grace of God, in August of 1978, we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather. Fantastic. We finally have a daughter. And after all the years, and after all the tears, and after all the doubts, we finally had a baby of our own, and my wife got pregnant the very next month. And our son Sean was born in July 1979. They were just about 10 months apart. Now, Sean and Heather were figuratively and literally close. Anybody who didn't know that Heather had been adopted would look at the two of them 10 months apart and go, 10 months apart? Man, you didn't give your wife much of a break, did you? But I had this proverbial millionaire's family. I've got a son and a daughter. This is great. And now we have kids, and any doubts I had about doing abortions simply evaporated, and I went back to business as usual. I graduated from my residency program in 1980, and we moved to, from Albany, New York, we moved down to the west coast of Florida for a year. We found out pretty quickly that a young couple with young kids in a retirement community didn't quite gel, so we left and went back to upstate New York a year later in 1981. And I joined a position that I had trained with. Now, Bill and I were practiced abortionists. Now, understand something. We were not running an abortion clinic. This was a routine OBGYN office like probably most women in this room have been to at one point or another. This wasn't an abortion clinic, but abortion is part of what we did. And in the early 80s, when I joined Bill, those of us in the abortion industry were looking for a better method of second trimester abortion. I talked about those saline abortions. Women going through labor for up to 2 days. This is difficult, painful, stressful, absolutely horrid for the patients. No fun for the staff either. We wanted a method of abortion for the late-termers that was like suction D&C. She could go to sleep, and when she woke up, it would all be over. And that's when suction D&E abortions, the one that I described, were developed. We saw an opportunity because not many doctors wanted to do that procedure. It's tricky. So we taught ourselves to do these second trimester D&E abortions. And we were accepting patients from other practices on referral to do these late-term abortions for them. Now understand, as I said, we were not running an abortion clinic. We did deliveries, hysterectomies, everything we always do. But over the next 4 years, I did 1,200 abortions. Over 100 were the late-term abortions that I talked about. But hey, life's good. Kids are growing. I finally can afford furniture. The practice is growing. Life's going on. All the things that you're looking forward to. And everything was just ducky, I thought, until June 23rd of 1984. June 23rd, 1984 was a Saturday. It was an absolutely beautiful day in Albany. It was sunny. It was warm. I was on call, but it wasn't too busy. I'd made rounds and got to spend the rest of the day with my family. We took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon. Heather was exactly 2 months away from her 6th birthday. Sean was a couple of days away from his 5th birthday. And we went to an amusement park. We had dinner together. And that evening, the kids were playing in the backyard, and we had friends coming over for cake and coffee. Our friends arrived. We started talking with them. And at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of our house. Kids had gone out in the road. Heather had been hit by a car. This is hard to talk about even after all this time. She was a mess. We went out and did everything we could. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife was an intensive care nurse. This was our job. This was routine for us. But it made absolutely no difference, and she died in our arms in the back of an ambulance that night. Now, I know you're mostly younger people. There are a few older adults here. But if you have kids, I always tell groups when I speak to them, if you have children, you may think, even if you don't, you may think you have some idea of what that feels like. If you haven't been through this yourself, you have absolutely no idea what this feels like, and I pray to God you never find out. But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child, you take a couple of weeks off, and then you try to get back in your life. And I don't know how long after it was that I was scheduled to do my first D&E abortion, but I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before. This was nothing, you know, this was routine. Obviously, I had other things on my mind. And the dedicated abortionist I was, I took that sofa clamp and I reached in and I ripped out an arm or a leg, and I just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. But you know something? Once you start an abortion, you can't stop. I talked before about stacking up body parts on the side of the table. This is not some gross story to freak people out at the lecture. When you do an abortion, you have to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient's going to come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I soldiered on and I finished that abortion. And I promise you that everything I'm telling you is firsthand and true. For the first time in my illustrious career, for the first time I looked, I mean I really looked at that pile of body parts, that goo on the side of the table. And all of a sudden, I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with her problem, and I didn't even see the $800 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And all of a sudden, this was looking very, very different to me. It occurred to me in that moment, looking at that pile of parts, that this woman had come to me and said, figuratively, never literally, here's $800, kill my baby. And I was the kind of person that would look her right back in the eye and say, why, sure, I'll do that, no problem. Needless to say, we were in a bit of a crisis. I told you that the biggest mistake we ever made was not hashing this out when we first met. And we'd been married over 5 years at that point. And it was a very, very difficult time, because the problem is when you stop talking about one important issue in your relationship, you've learned it's easy to avoid other issues as well. And we've been drifting apart. But now everything got torn wide open. I got into a blame game. I'm feeling bad. So I got into a blame game. You know, it's the girl's fault for getting pregnant. It's the nurse's fault for scheduling the procedure. It's the hospital's fault for allowing them. Of course, you know, and I'm no different than anybody else. It's everybody's fault but mine. And my wife always knew when I had abortions the next day, just from the way I was acting. Well, after a couple of months from this, she'd had it up to there. As I told you, I'm full-blooded Sicilian. She's full-blooded Irish. And we had arguments. Trust me, they were cool. All right? But at this point, she'd had it. And unbeknownst to me, she'd already packed a bag, and she was 2 minutes away from walking out. But she was going to have her say. That is my wife. And she did. You know, you stupid idiot, it's not the girl's fault. It's not the hospital's fault. It's not the nurse's fault. It's your fault. You dumb fool. If you feel so bad about this, why don't you just quit? That was the icebreaker. And we ended up talking for an hour and a half about a lot of issues, including the abortion issue. And thankfully, she decided not to walk out. I went to my partners the next day and announced that I would no longer do any late-term second trimester D&E abortions. We used to do them up to 24 weeks. A 24-week baby is, the length of your hand is 20, add another 50%, that's 24. They grow fast at that stage. I said I would no longer do any more of the late-term D&E abortions. It was just too difficult. And my partners understood at first. And I told them, look, I was hard-headed. I was saying, I'm just going to do the little ones we do in the office up to 10 weeks. And for another couple of months, I soldiered on and did those. And I know you look up to physicians. I know a lot of people respect physicians. We're no different than you. It sounds so stupid to sit up here and tell you this. I mean, I'm a professional. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I do all this stuff, right? Once you've figured out that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, it doesn't take you too long here, not here, to realize that it doesn't matter if the baby is this big or this big or this big or maybe even this big. It's all the same. And it was February 1985. I'm ashamed to say it was that long. I went to my partners a second time and I told them I would no longer do any more abortions. I haven't done one since then, and I never will. But that's what it took for me to personally understand exactly what I was doing. And when somebody goes, I'm pro-choice, then I hope they understand exactly what it is that they're championing. That's part of the reason why I'm here. Now, this is one of the most divisive issues in our country. The only issue that even comes close to being this divisive in our country was slavery back in the 1800s. This is the big divisive issue of the 20th now into the 21st century. So, let's test your abortion knowledge. Somebody answer my question. How late in pregnancy is it legal to perform an abortion?
Up until the day of.
What? Day of, up to the day of birth. Anybody argue with that? Seriously? Go ahead.
I thought you couldn't when they get into the third trimester, or it's like not allowed.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Do you I know most of you are not in medicine. Trimesters. How long is a woman pregnant? 9 months, right? Except no doctor ever talks months. It's too wishy-washy, okay? How many weeks are there in a month? Well, 4. Well, 9 times 4 is 36, but in reality, women are pregnant for 40 weeks. So it's either 10 months, you see how confusing it gets? So doctors never talk about months. We count from the last day of your period. Yes, we know you weren't pregnant back then, but it's something we can point to. And all the machines, everything's calibrated for date from last period. And a woman is pregnant for 40 weeks. Well, 40 weeks almost divides by 3, 39 does. So we have 3 trimesters. From conception to about 13 weeks is the first trimester. 13 to 27 weeks, so we threw in the extra week, is the second trimester, and the third trimester is 28 to term. Okay? So we can talk a little bit about trimesters. So the answer is, their answer is true. You could do an abortion right up to the time of delivery. What? A lot of people, I'm surprised. Go ahead.
Name one state where that's actually possible.
Speak way up.
Name a single state where that's actually possible.
All 50 of them.
No.
Sorry?
Every state in this country,
Yes?
a single one,
Yes?
has a law in the books that in some way, shape, or form prevents that.
Yes. That's what the state law says.
Every single state.
Absolutely correct. Why doesn't that matter? Roe versus Wade. Constitutional law trumps state law. Sorry for the pun. Okay? It trumps state law. So let's go to the next question. Let me ask you a question. It doesn't matter what the state law says. In Texas, I think the law still says that all abortions are illegal. Sorry? Go Texas, right? Some states restrict it to 24 weeks. Some states restrict it for all kinds of reasons. But none of those laws are operative. They cannot be because of Roe versus Wade. Now, let me ask you a question. What's your name? First name?
Jack, I'm a PhD student in Science, Technology, and Society program here.
Okay, almost Dr. Jack. Congratulations. Dr. Jack, are you a human being? I would too. How do I know that you're a human being?
I don't know if you do.
I do. Don't you? What is a human being?
Right here, like, what do you want from me?
What I want from you is to understand that being a human is a matter of, a human being is a certain animal that kind of looks this way and has 46 human chromosomes, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, it's not all human beings have 46 chromosomes.
Not all human beings, some of them have others. We're talking about the norm. Okay? The fact is, you are a human being by scientific definition. Dr. Jack, can we agree on that?
Human being by scientific definition, yes, I think we can agree.
Excellent.
If we assume that there's something with a scientific definition of life, which I'm not entirely convinced of, but we can talk about that later.
Fair. Jack, are you a person?
Legally or otherwise?
Are you a person?
My background's in philosophy, so we're going to get more specific here for me.
I'm happy. That's exactly where I'm going. Are you a person? Yes, you are.
I'm not a person in this country. I might not be a person in another country where I'm not recognized legally as a person.
And there we go. What is the difference, Jack, between a human being and a person, if any?
Probably legality.
Legality. He's talking law. And that's where we have to go if you want to understand this. Legal thinking is not normal thinking, okay? In law, every single word has a definition, and this is a long answer to his simple question, okay? What is the difference? I'm going to pick on somebody else. Jack knows he's a human being. Jack also is a person. What's the difference? Go. What? Personality? You mean like having a cheerful personality?
Like the differentiation between people, like between you, I'm significantly different from the person.
People vary, but that's not the difference between a person and a human. Go ahead. What's the difference? Say again?
I'm going to go with there isn't one.
There isn't a difference between human and person. Sorry. You see, in law, every word has a meaning. And in law, there are only two things in the entire universe. In the whole universe of law, there are only two things: person and property. You are one or the other. This is my property, okay? I could gift it to someone. I could sell it. I could break it. No one would be the least bit shocked. But this is a person. I can't touch her without her consent. If I don't, it's assault. So now, man, with that little hint, and Jack actually knows because he said it, the difference is in law. What does a person have that a human doesn't necessarily have?
A person has like certain
One word.
like constitutional like rights from the state and the government and inalienable rights.
Yeah, you use the word. Now cut all that out and give me one word. Person has rights. And that's the difference. In fact, is there ever a time when a human being was property? Yeah, slavery again. All right? And that's a perfect example. They were not people. They were not people by law. Somebody simply said, you're of a person of color, and you come to this country a certain way, and you're bought and sold, you are property. And it's that way because I say so. That's the difference. All right, now let's go back to Roe versus Wade. What is Roe versus, and this is why the answer to Jack's question, yeah, different states have different laws, and none of them make any difference whatsoever. None. None. What does Roe actually say? Roe says that in the first trimester, and this is why I explain trimesters, a state cannot restrict a woman's right to an abortion. She can have an abortion for any reason, just nothing goes. It's wide open. In the second trimester, Roe says, states can regulate abortion, but only in technical ways. You could make laws stating, for instance, in our state, you can only have a second trimester abortion in a hospital. or only doctors could do abortions. And that may sound strange to you, but a lot of abortions are done by non-doctors. In the third trimester, when these kids become viable, capable of life outside the womb, now, if the state wishes, they can limit or restrict abortion or stop abortion entirely based on viability. Except a state can restrict abortion or prohibit abortion in the third trimester unless the woman's health is the issue. This is law. What's the next question you should ask? What does health mean? That's the way it's written. What does health mean? And Roe versus Wade did not define the word health. Now, how many people here have ever heard of Doe versus Bolton? Several of you. Good. Most people haven't. Everybody knows Roe versus Wade. For 99% of this country, the only Supreme Court decision they could name is Roe versus Wade. Okay? Doe versus Bolton was a companion case that was ruled on the same day as Roe. And Doe did define health. Health includes a woman's physical health. Well, that's great. How bad does her physical health have to be? Didn't say. How about she's got cancer and she's going to die? That's pretty serious physical health. How about she's diabetic? How about she has mild renal disease? How about she's suffering from headaches? They're all her physical health. It also includes her mental health, okay? But how bad does her mental health have to be? Doesn't say. It includes her economic health. Whoa. How rich do you have to be economically unhealthy? Doesn't say. And my favorite, it includes her social health. What in blazes is that? Actually, in my practice, I did have one example, an abortion I did do. First, I would say would probably fall into the definition of social health if you wanted to use that definition. She was a teenager, she was 17, she was a senior in high school. She did not want to be pregnant for her senior prom. That's why she was there. This was her fifth pregnancy, her fifth abortion, in fact. But she didn't want to be pregnant for her prom. That was her reason, so she got her abortion. I did it. And this is where the politics comes in. Clinton was the last one I remember when he was president. There was a push to ban what's called partial birth abortion, intact DNX abortions. And Clinton said, you know what, I will be, and this is where the politics comes, and this is why you have to understand this. I will be happy to sign that law as long as it has a health exception. What did he just say? I'm happy to pass any pro-life legislation you put on my desk so long as there's an exception so big the law is ineffective. So that's the answer to Jack's question. It doesn't matter if, Utah says you can only do abortions up to 20 weeks. Roe says you can do them all the way up to the end of the pregnancy as long as you have a health reason. And the definitions for health are incredibly broad. So broad that they mean nothing. Okay, so Roe, actually, we always talk about Roe, but it's mostly been supplanted. At this point, the one that really operates is Casey versus Planned Parenthood. It was 1992, I think. At this point, and the problem was, and the court recognized this, the problem was Roe was based on fetal viability. Roe was ruled on in 1973. What has happened in fetal viability in 1973 was on the outside, if you were lucky, 28, 29 weeks out of the 40. But medical progress did not simply stand still. That's 45 years ago. Things have changed, and fetal viability has gone lower and lower and lower and lower to the point now that it's probably somewhere between 20 and 22. That's the outer limits of it, but that's where we're at. And even Sandra Day O'Connor, once said Roe versus Wade was on a collision course with itself because of that. So the new standard, the one that operates now, is what's in Casey. And Casey basically says you cannot, no state may restrict abortion, no state may pass a law which presents an, quote, undue burden on the right to abortion. Again, that's really, really vague. It's wide open because it's not defined. But that's where things are at. All right, I've been talking for quite a while. I'm going to stop. Let's answer your questions. What would you like to know? So in answer to Jack's question, it doesn't matter what state law says. As long as I can justify a health exception, I can do an abortion anytime. And they are done that late. Oh, I have some videos to show, but we'll get to them in a second. Go ahead, Jack. Keep it up, because I'm an old man, can't hear. Actually, you gotta come down to the microphone, Jack. It'll work better.
People hear me?
Can you hear me now? Get right up to it.
All right, I'm gonna try to wrap my mouth around it. All right, I got 2 short questions.
I never give short answers.
I appreciate that. The first is, what is the... I'm gonna need you to name a case where somebody's been able to legally justify in a time period where they could consider getting an abortion the case you described, because I think that's important to actually see one example of this happening and not just take your word for it, which
Okay.
I think you'd also appreciate. My second question, which
I'm
follows up on
glad you
that...
said that. I'm going to show you a video. Go ahead.
All right. Second question is, what trumps what? The economic possibility of getting an abortion or federal law concerning abortion? Because if there are no abortion clinics to get an abortion, then it doesn't matter if legally you can, does it?
I hear you. What good is a right if you can't actually use it? Anybody heard the name George Tiller? Who's George Tiller? Yeah, abortionist. He worked in Kansas, and he was famous for really late-term abortions. Used to charge $5,000 a procedure. And he was assassinated in the back of his church by somebody who claimed to be pro-life, who clearly doesn't know what the word means. His business, he left in a state of about $1 billion behind. And some of the physicians he worked with, they left, and they set up their own, a physician named Curtis Boyd, in fact, was the head of the group, and set up practice in Albuquerque, New Mexico, about 3 hours from where I used to live, called Southwest Women's Options. And if you would like to see what goes on in terms of late-term abortion, here's your chance. Pay attention to this, because I'll ask some questions, a quiz at the end.
Dr. Boyd, Southwestern Women's Options. How may I help you?
Hi, I was hoping to schedule an abortion.
All right. What was the day of your last period?
It was like the middle of May, so like May 15th, probably.
All right, so it looks like we can do this for you, but it is going to be a week-long procedure. So if you're able to come next week, and we start this on the 12th, I'm going to be looking at a fee of $8,000.
Oh.
Now, are you still in your chair?
Oh, just barely.
Just barely. But what you also need to keep in mind is that every week that goes by, the fee goes up by another $1,000.
Well, we get is at your 27 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yep. So you're about a month. Yeah, actually, you're about a month off in how you thought.
Oh, wow.
You were.
To insert the injection, it's going straight into the sac and to the pregnancy. Okay, it's bottom down. It'll insert through the baby's bottom. Okay.
Okay,
if
so
it's the head down, it'll be inserted through the head, through the cranium. If we can't catch it early enough, which it has happened. If you're feeling pressure, it's moving down or something coming out. The pregnancy coming out, then you'll want to unlock the door to the hotel room, get your cell phone, and just sit on the toilet. You don't have to look at anything. You don't have to clean anything up or nothing. Just be on the phone with us, and and you could stay on the phone with us until the doctor and nurse get there. Okay?
Oh, good. So just go in the toilet if I'm having labor. Okay.
Yeah.
And what if it does come out when I'm on the toilet?
Just, you don't gotta look down. You don't gotta do anything. The doctor and nurse will come take care of it. If you feel like it's too much to see any of it, then do not let yourself look at it.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
if you want to cover yourself, even with like a towel or something,
Okay.
go ahead.
If you're one of those lucky people that has no pain with contractions and all of a sudden you're like, something's coming out, you sit on the toilet
Okay.
and you call us and you unlock the hotel room and we come in and we take care of you.
If I'm on the toilet
Yeah.
and it pops out and it's in the toilet,
Yeah.
what do I do?
You would just sit there and you would stay there
Okay.
and you would not move until we come and get you.
Okay. I mean, I don't have to worry about like
You don't have to look
taking
at
it out or
anything, You don't have
anything.
to clean anything. You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
You will do.
We
Okay.
take care of everything.
There's a 27-weeker for you. This particular pregnancy, they'll do them at any time in pregnancy. How much did this abortion cost? How much? 8,000? No. It's 8,000 at 25 weeks. It's 1,000 for every week after that. This is 27 weeks. This is a $10,000 abortion. And you can bet they don't take Medicaid. Okay? Next. What did you just see? And you heard the doctor and the counselor both talking. This woman, for $10,000 cash, is going to labor alone in a hotel room. And she's going to deliver, very likely or possibly, going to deliver her dead son or daughter into a toilet. For $10,000, they cannot afford to have a nurse or a doctor sit with a woman who's in active labor in the late second trimester, early third trimester. And she will deliver her dead son or daughter into a toilet. This is what is happening in some places in this country. Have another question, Jack?
Well, you didn't answer the second one, but I also like to follow up with the first one.
Go ahead.
It was from liveaction.com, yeah?
That's right.
And that was, wasn't that the series of videos associated with the pro-life group making fake videos to document not accurately functioning abortion clinics in order to lobby the Senate? I think a bunch of these videos, if I'm remembering this one correctly because I've seen it before, was played on the Senate floor to try to justify a pro-life bill, and has later come out to be that it's entirely made from actors.
Not true that I'm aware of.
If you'd like to Google it, the live action group is pretty well documented, and my memory serves, I have seen that video before, and that is in the list of ones that were entirely fabricated. So that's why I was asking for a legal case where this happens, where somebody's challenged the state law in order to get the Roe v. Wade third trimester abortion.
They shouldn't have to. They can go to Southwest Women's Options at 34 weeks and say, I want an abortion, and they'll do it.
No, they can't, because the state funds those groups and funds those clinics and will deny.
Whoa. The state funds Southwest Women's, or Southwest Women's Options is a private doctor's office. It's nothing to do with state funding. They don't accept state funding.
But the prevalence of clinics does. Most people can't afford a $10,000 abortion even without the nurse being there.
Granted, most people aren't going to spend $10,000 on an abortion. You said that they couldn't get it, and I'm telling you they can. I can buy a private jet if I could have enough money, but I don't have that much money, but that's my problem. The fact is it can be done. With the money, it can be done.
Legally or otherwise.
Legally, this is what you saw is absolutely legal under Roe versus Wade. In fact, I believe New Mexico has a law, well, I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure New Mexico has a law restricting abortions to 24 weeks. Makes no difference.
And if somebody who can afford a $10,000 abortion can fly to Canada and get a $4,000 abortion.
Well, yeah, granted. Okay, so what you proved is healthcare can be cheaper in Canada, but doesn't prove whether you can or can't get it. You can get it. That's all there is to it. And as far as live action, you're implying that everything live action produces is fake. I can tell you from personal experience that is simply not true. And as far as this video is concerned, this video was presented to the Judiciary Committee of the House by me.
Oh, you're the one who was using and trying to pitch for that bill. That explains a lot. Thank you.
Attaboy, Jack.
I'm putting the dots.
Anybody else have a question? Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. So, when you do abortion, or when you did abortions, and you have like the tongs, I forgot what they're called.
When I have what?
The clamp.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Does the baby try to avoid it at all, or can it even really move?
Does the baby try to
avoid it?
avoid it?
Yeah.
They move. And I know from personal experience that babies are sensitive in various ways, including touch and, yes, to pain too. But it's not going to matter. It's me against the baby. I'm going to win 100% of the time.
Thank you.
I want to show a couple more videos to keep it a little more interesting. Sorry, Jack. These are more from that organization you don't like.
America's largest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood, claims over and over and over again that abortion is only 3% of the services that they offer.
That's your self-reported abortion statistic.
3% of all the procedures we provide.
It's in their annual report. It's on their website. And their supporters say it all the time.
And abortions only comprise 3% of Planned Parenthood's health services.
Abortion services only account for about 3%.
Because only 3% of what Planned Parenthood does is abortions.
3% of patients visit Planned Parenthood for a safe and legal abortion.
Here's why that statistic is completely bogus, and why the senior editor of the online magazine Slate said that the 3% stat was the, quote, most meaningless abortion statistic ever, and why the Washington Post fact checker gave Planned Parenthood's 3% statistic 3 Pinocchios, marking it as, quote, very misleading. Let's look at the numbers. According to their own annual report, Planned Parenthood commits over 300,000 abortions per year. Last year alone, they did 323,999 abortions, which averages to 887 abortions per day, 37 abortions per hour, 1 abortion every 97 seconds. Again, Planned Parenthood commits 1 abortion every 97 seconds. But how much of what Planned Parenthood does is abortion? Well, let's divide the number of abortions they do in a year by the number of patients they see in a year. 323,999 abortions for 2.5 million patients means that 1 in 8 patients who walk into Planned Parenthood will undergo an abortion. Not 1 in 33, Elizabeth Warren, 1 in 8. It's easy to see where Planned Parenthood's priorities are. They commit 160 abortions for every 1 adoption referral. Though Planned Parenthood constantly talks about their breast exams and Pap tests, they only do less than 1% of the nation's Pap tests and 1.8% of the nation's breast exams, while they do 30.6%, a third of the nation's abortions. But that's a public relations problem. So Planned Parenthood came up with a creative way to make their big business, abortion, look very small. To get the 3% figure, Planned Parenthood divides abortions by the number of so-called services, which they define as a discrete clinical interaction. And they count all these services equally, regardless of the cost, time, or effort it takes to render that service. So an entire abortion procedure, which can cost from $390 to $1,500, is counted the same as a pregnancy test, which a girl could get at a pharmacy for $10. In this way, Planned Parenthood is able to count 9.4 million services. Divide 323,999 abortions by 9.4 million services, and they get 3%. It's easy to see why this math is completely ridiculous. Say a woman goes to Planned Parenthood to get an abortion. She gets her pregnancy test, the abortion procedure, an STI test, and some contraceptives. In one visit, she gets 4 services, one of which is the actual abortion. So Planned Parenthood would say that abortion was only 25% of what they did for that woman, who came into the clinic only for an abortion. Well, by this math, even if 100% of Planned Parenthood patients got an abortion, they would still say abortion is only 25% of their services. Such distorted calculations could be used to obscure the purpose of any business. It would be like the NFL saying that because they sold 5 million hot dogs in a season and there were only 256 games, football is only 0.005% of what they do. Or it'd be like a steakhouse saying, actually, steak is only a very small percentage of what we serve because we also serve salad, mashed potatoes, french fries, beer, wine, soda, water, butter, salt, pepper, ketchup, toothpicks, and breath mints. We'd say, yeah, right, you're a steakhouse. Just like Planned Parenthood is an abortion corporation.
I'm picking on Planned Parenthood, one more.
We don't offer any prenatal care.
We don't offer prenatal care at Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood offers abortion, so they don't offer prenatal care.
Prenatal care.
These are the kinds of services that folks depend on Planned Parenthood for.
And a president who will fight for prenatal care.
Prenatal care. And that is what we want to focus on. That is what is so vital.
Thank you for calling Planned Parenthood. My name's how can I assist you today?
Hi, I was hoping to make an appointment for prenatal care.
For what type of service?
Prenatal care, pregnancy care.
We don't have prenatal care here. Planned Parenthood offers abortion, so they don't offer prenatal care.
Okay, just abortions.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. We wouldn't provide any type of prenatal services here at Planned Parenthood.
We're not a prenatal care provider. No Planned Parenthood does prenatal care. We don't offer prenatal care at Planned Parenthood. We specialize in abortions. You know, that's what our ultrasounds are for, to see how far along the patient is.
Planned Parenthood, we do birth control, you know,
Yeah.
things like that, termination. We check for STI, but we don't do prenatal.
We tell you you're pregnant, and we absolutely prefer to do the abortions.
Okay.
Okay. So we don't do any prenatal services
No
here.
prenatal.
No, we don't do prenatal services. I mean, it's called Planned Parenthood. I know it's kind of deceiving.
Do you have OBGYNs here?
We do not, no.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Which is a deceptive name, right? I think the same thing. Or, you know, if you were looking into termination options, we can do that as well.
Did you know that Planned Parenthood can take care of all your reproductive health needs? Whether it's an annual exam, pregnancy testing and counseling, prenatal care, we are here for you with high-quality, low-cost services.
Thank you for holding. This is. How can I help you?
Hi. I was wondering if you guys offer prenatal care.
No, we don't. Not at the moment. Neither our Hampton or Richmond office does.
We don't offer any prenatal care.
Is there any other clinic you can refer me to?
I don't know of anything. I would look around on the internet.
You can try CareNet. I think they do prenatal care.
CareNet?
It's the first building on this strip here.
We only offer family planning services and abortion services.
Not at all at Planned Parenthood.
Okay, so not at any Planned Parenthood. They don't have prenatal
Correct.
care.
No, see, we don't see pregnant women as a way of giving prenatal care.
Okay.
We see pregnant women, you know, if they are considering other options.
Like, what other options? Like, would you see the doctor for?
At this location?
Yes.
So at this location, you guys do medication abortion?
Medication abortion.
What pregnancy services do you offer?
We only offer termination services.
We actually don't offer prenatal services. We're not licensed to do so in Oregon or Washington.
Do any of the Planned Parenthoods?
No, we do not offer any prenatal care.
Next.
I know one of the arguments in defense of pro-choice is for stem cell research, but is there any alternatives to stem cell research besides using aborted fetuses?
Yeah, it's a great alternative for stem cell research. Stem cell research, you gotta understand there's two places you can get stem cells. One is from fertilized conceptuses, and you basically tease out the fetal cells and you've got stem cells. But you can get stem cells by the gallon, literally by the gallon, at delivery from the placenta. These are placental cord stem cells. Now, it's a really fertile area of research. A lot more has to go into it. Up to now, at least, there have been some incredible cures using stem cells. All of them have involved placental stem cells collected at delivery. A number of treatments have been attempted using stem cells from embryos. In fact, to my knowledge, so far all of them have failed. Now this may be an area that, this is an area that's changing, growing all the time. But yes, there is a perfectly good and ethical place you can get stem cells that don't involve tearing apart embryos. The most promising results so far have come from placental stem cells. Good question. I've stunned you into silence. Go ahead. Microphone, please. Or here, you can have mine. It's closer.
We often hear defense about going back to the coat hanger type abortions, and that back in the old days that more people, so many women died from this because there was not abortion available. But with the large number of abortions, over 1 million a year here in the United States, what is the percentage of women's death? Because when you have a larger number of abortions, even though they're legal, is there more deaths than maybe what there were when it wasn't legal and there weren't as many children, as many women getting abortions?
Are there more deaths now, you're suggesting, from abortion than there were in the old days when it was illegal? That's an interesting question. I would guess no, but the problem is that we don't really know how many deaths there were from abortion prior to the legalization of abortion. Bernard Nathanson, who's somebody I was acquainted with, he's dead now, but Bernard Nathanson was a very famous obstetrician gynecologist who started doing abortions in New York once it was legalized, and he was one of the founders of the NARAL, the National Abortion Rights Action League. I guess now it's the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League, NARAL, but still NARAL. So he was very, very well known in abortion circles, had done over 80,000 abortions, and then eventually became pro-life himself and then fought against it. He wrote a book. He was one of the people at the beginning, and especially with NARAL's founding, because they were strong proponents of abortion and for the legalization of abortion. And the figure that was bandied around was that there were 5,000 deaths a year before Roe was, from illegal abortions in the United States before Roe came along. But then once, afterwards, he wrote an autobiography, and he talked about that figure, and he said that the figure was simply made up. They had no idea. And even to this day, we don't really know. There are several professional articles out about the safety of elective abortion, or the safety of, in talking about strictly mortality now, of elective abortion compared to, say, childbirth. And this is an argument, and it's an argument that has some merit. Well, wait a minute, you're telling me I can't have an abortion, that means I have to have a delivery, and it's more dangerous to have a delivery. That's a really complicated question, and you can talk about that all day long. The problem, as I said, there are lots of studies about mortality rates from childbirth. There are lots of studies out there about mortality, a few, about mortality from abortions. But the problem is the numbers really aren't reliable, and everybody in medicine knows this. I mean, how many abortions are there? Just how many abortions are there a year? We don't really know. The figure was as high as 1.5 million, and now the number's lower. But I will tell you, and I will tell you from personal experience, the vast majority of abortions, at least I'm going to talk for myself, and I think this is true industry-wide, most abortions simply aren't reported. I was required by law to file a fetal death certificate every time I did an abortion. I did, in private practice, I did approximately, the exact number was 1,196, I counted them up, abortions in private practice. The only fetal death certificates I filed were the ones I did in the hospital, about 120 of them, the late termers. I never filed the other 1,000. So here's one doctor, I can talk about me, who underreported my abortions by 1,000 over a period of 4 years. So we don't really know. And on the flip side, when you're talking about mortality, we don't really know. There have been deaths from abortion procedures. There's a death from all medical procedures. And the problem becomes, I mean, it can be pretty dramatic. If you lacerate the uterine artery or something and a woman bleeds to death on the table, it's pretty obvious the abortion caused her death. But that is not, and that has happened, but that's not the usual case. There was in my town, Las Cruces, several years ago, a woman came in to the emergency room who had had a perfectly safe and legal abortion in El Paso. This was 10 days later. She had a massive sepsis and died on the operating room table. Now, I don't know, but I'll bet you good money the death certificate said sepsis, because she died of sepsis. But when it comes to counting statistics, it's very unlikely that the abortion is ever going to be implicated because it's not on the death certificate. So we can throw numbers around, but it's difficult to really be precise because of underreporting on the procedures themselves and inadequate counting in terms of when a mortality occurs, what really was the root cause of it. Something else I want to say, and this is kind of a spin-off from the video that we saw from the late-term abortion clinic. You often hear about how abortion is necessary to save women's lives. Well, there are times you have to end a pregnancy to save a woman's life, no question about it. But is abortion useful per se? Is that useful in that case? And let me give you, we'll even use 27 weeks because it happens to gel with what I was about to say. This is a real case. Patient came in, I was on call. She's having her second child. And I know there are not a lot of medical students in the room, but I know most of you know the answer. What's a normal blood pressure? What's an average blood pressure? If your average temperature is 98.6, what's your average blood pressure? 120/80. And most people know those numbers, okay? The 120 is your systolic pressure, the pressure that the heart forces the blood out, and the 80 is the systemic vascular resistance otherwise. And we get both numbers when we measure blood pressure. And we know that high blood pressure is bad. Okay. This woman was 27 weeks pregnant and had a condition called preeclampsia. It's very serious. Results in severely high blood pressures during pregnancy. Pregnancy is the cause of the disease. It can cause disruption of renal function. It can be fatal. Her blood pressure when she came into the hospital when I was on call was 220/160. Right? She is hours or maybe even minutes away from a stroke. Now let's say we wanted to treat her problem by doing an abortion. Would that be possible? We heard about a 27-week abortion on the video. Do you remember something else they said beside the $10,000 charge? It's a week-long procedure, okay? This is not exactly a natural procedure. I worked at the Albany Medical Center as a student, as a resident, and then years later as faculty. And I took care of high-risk pregnancies. For 10 years, that was my job. I was supervising residents and taking care of high-risk pregnancies. And I saw it all. Preeclampsia, cancers, out-of-control diabetes or heart disease. When these things occur in pregnancy, they typically occur in the late second or third trimester, okay? And believe me, there are times when you must end the pregnancy to save the woman's life, period. You have to, all right? And there's no choice involved. And I have ended hundreds of pregnancies to save women's lives. How many children did I have to deliberately kill in the process? None. I terminated their pregnancy. See, they've stolen the term. Termination of pregnancy means abortion. No, it means ending the pregnancy process. That woman, you stabilize her blood pressure, you put her on a table, you do a cesarean section, half an hour, the baby's out, getting the care it needs because that child's premature, and she's getting the care she needs to take care of her preeclampsia. In a real medical emergency, I've maintained this over and over based on personal experience, abortion is worthless for saving women's lives because yes, it would end the pregnancy, but it takes too long. In a real emergency, you don't have that kind of time. You just don't. If you take minimum 3 days for a 27-week abortion, minimum 3 days. If you waited 3 days to treat her problem, she'd be dead. She'd never make 3 days. Any other questions? Are we done? Go ahead. Make it loud then. I'm old. Okay. Great question. How about that? Let's have a woman in her first trimester. Let's make her 13 weeks pregnant, okay? And she's diagnosed with cervical cancer. What would I do? As a pro-life physician, what would I do? I terminate the pregnancy and treat her cancer. She's going to die. You do not trade her life. Never. You have an ectopic pregnancy. Pregnancy's in the tube. You do an ultrasound. There's a heartbeat. What do? terminate the pregnancy because it's going to kill her. Okay? There are such situations. They're not common. And as I said, my 10 years of experience in a tertiary referral center is I never had to do, I treated lots of ectopics. I treated lots of molar pregnancies. I treated 1 or 2 of those cancers. And yeah, we terminated the pregnancy. You have to. Go ahead. Molar, what's a molar pregnancy? Imagine a pregnancy, it's a pregnancy where there's, instead of 46, 2 sets of 23 chromosomes, there's 3, as one example. And you get a very, very deformed pregnancy, and it will cause that preeclampsia, the same condition I talked about before, far earlier in pregnancy than it would happen otherwise. You must terminate the pregnancy, absolutely, and ASAP. Go ahead, ma'am.
Abortion can cause, and there's studies showing that it causes an increase in breast cancer. Could you tell us?
Abortion and breast cancer. A really complicated intersection of politics and medicine. Does abortion increase the risk of breast cancer down the road? A lot of doctors believe it does. I'm one of them. A lot of doctors don't. You're shaking your head, Jack. Do you know the research on this particular one?
Probably not as well as you do, I will admit.
But that's okay. I wouldn't expect you to know it as well as I do.
A lot of doctors don't believe that there's a connection, and it's still a question that's up in the air.
It is, and that's the fairest answer in the world. It's still in the air. The fact is, but there is some politics involved. There have been 3 studies that show no association of abortion and breast cancer. So the American College of Obstetrician Gynecologists, a pro-choice organization, comes out and goes, look, there's no association. We proved it. There's about 150 studies that do show an association. And this is an area that needs more research and less politics. That's how I feel about it. The science behind it, everyone knows, everyone in medicine knows that one of the best defenses that you can possibly do, a best thing a woman can do to lower her lifetime risk of cancer is to go through a full-term pregnancy. Everybody knows this. The other thing that a woman can do to seriously reduce her risk of breast cancer in the future, and again, this is well established, is breastfeed. Okay? Yet, at the beginning of pregnancy, what do women say about their breasts? They're sore. They're not just engorged. It's proliferative. The cells are dividing rapidly. That's what cancers do too, although this is not a cancer. These are cells proliferating like mad. They're in what's called type 1. Type 1 cells are cancer prone. Type 2 cells are cancer prone. So we know that if you've got a large number of proliferating cells that are cancer prone at the beginning of pregnancy, what is it that changes? What and when does it change? And it's really interesting. The research shows it's very, very sharp at 32 weeks. If she can achieve 32 weeks of pregnancy, the cells in the breast convert, the lobules in the breast convert to type 3 and 4. I don't want to overdo it, the science. Type 3 and 4 are cancer resistant. That's where the changeover occurs. So the question was, if a pregnancy is terminated or ended, let's not use that word, I'm not talking just about abortion. If a pregnancy ends for any reason prior to 32 weeks, you've got large numbers of type 1 and 2 lobules in the breast, and suddenly you've cut off the hormone support. So that's where it's believed that the increase from cancer risk can come. But there are studies in both directions. There are far more that show a cancer association, but it's still an area that needs research. Jack is absolutely right.
Okay, so I know that my faith has done a lot to make me pro-life. So was it all medical and all science that kind of changed your mind, or was faith involved at all?
I told you what may change my mind. It had nothing to do with faith and all the rest of that. It was a life experience that had nothing to do with religion. I totally respect people who have a pro-life attitude based on their religious feelings, but that's not why I changed my mind. And if you're going to talk about this with people, because there are people who have all kinds of different opinions, in my opinion, if you're going to be effective, you have to be able, unless you're in a specific religious group and you want to talk about it within the religious group, great. But otherwise, you have to be able to talk about this without bringing religion up at all. And that's why I don't even mention it.
Hi. Okay, so as a part of the Students for Life Club that recognizes what you talked about, I'm sorry, that buzzing, I don't know. Seeing that abortion is wrong and wanting to do something to change it, and being someone that has performed abortions and now speaks in front of the Judicial Committee, what, in your opinion, is the best way for us to go about rectifying abortion? And, like, what can you tell us to do as students who don't perform abortions ourselves? What is your recommendation for how we can take part in this, and how is most effective to go about ending this?
What can the average person do? There are a lot of ways you can participate one way or the other. I mean, the most effective and most important thing you people can do is vote. I can't emphasize that enough. It drives me mad when people, let's talk about people of faith, will sit there and then vote for politicians that are perfectly okay with abortion practice. I mean, seriously? I gave a speech a few years ago, I won't repeat, but that was the subject of it. Understand the ins and outs. Some of the stuff I've tried to cover is a start. You know, what's the law behind it really? What's the actual practice really? Most communities have pregnancy assistance centers in them. If this is something you believe in and want to participate in it, do it. Get involved politically. And, you know, if you really want to be personal about it, does your own doctor do abortions? Have you ever asked? There's a lot of ways you can be involved. You don't have to be a doctor. Most important, vote. I think we're done. Thank you for coming.